I have just finished distilling my own vodka, except technically it's not vodka in spirit. It kind of is. I don't know. What it definitely is different. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, this is Still It, and this technically is not vodka. Because technically, if it was going to be vodka, it would have to be distilled off the still on average to around about 95%. This isn't. It's a little bit lower, but there's a very good reason for that. Unfortunately, in terms of naming it or designating it, it falls into a bit of a no man's land. It's too low to be vodka. It's too high to be a whiskey. Why did I make it like this? Here's the thing, team. I have a project coming up soon, something else I'm going to make from this spirit. I'll let you know at the end of the video, if you care. And I want a very specific spirit to make that next project. It has to be relatively high ABV. It has to be relatively subtle in terms of its flavors. But I wanted a grain presence, a fruit presence, and a little bit of smoke. So this isn't a vodka, but it's also like no vodka I've ever seen. Kinda. Let's get stuck in. Right here, I have a mash tun full of a little bit under 50 litres water. Honestly, the volume of water is not going to matter too much with this because we're going to be doctoring it with sugar later on. Just so you know how much I've got though. It's already heated up. It's at 65 degrees Celsius. There will be freedom units popping up around here for those of you that think in freedom units, so you can follow along as well. And we have the claw hammer system holding it at 65 degrees Celsius for us. I'm not worrying about strike temperature. I'm just going to let the system do its job. Let's start mashing in. And while I do so, I'll tell you what the grist is for this part of the ferment. It is 5 kilos of Gladfield's New Zealand peated malt. So that is New Zealand barley, grown in New Zealand, malted in New Zealand, and smoked with peat that's been dug out of the ground in New Zealand as well. So yes, it's peat. No, it's not quite the same as Scottish peat. And to be honest, I think that's a really good thing. I love Scottish peat, don't get me wrong. It's one of my favorite things. It's the reason that I'm making this. But the New Zealand peat adds its own little kind of twist on that peaty flavor. To me, if you've spent any time in the New Zealand bush, it smells like lush New Zealand bush, the kind of like rotting leaf litter. That probably sounds strange to some of you, but trust me, it's an absolutely delicious smell. Anywho, enough of that. Back to the grist. 5 kilos of New Zealand peated malt and 4 kilos of Gladfield's distillers malt. And we're going to add something else into this a little bit later on as well. But let me get the rest of this barley in, and then we'll talk about what else is going in here. A couple of minutes later, and all that malted barley is in. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a stir to make sure we don't have any lumpy, bumpy bits. And I'm also going to add 2 kilos of oats. These are essentially quick oats, rolled oats, whatever else you want to call them. Easy oats, I've seen them called. Steam flecked oats. Basically oats that have been gelatinized. They've been heat treated and rolled. So the starch has already been gelatinized, which means it's available to the enzymes in the mash so we can actually convert them. We're adding the oats in to help give us that extra creamy, thick, voluptuous mouthfeel, even though we're using a decent amount of sugar. And we're actually going to double down on the oats a little bit later on. All right, one more thing to get in here after I give this a little bit more of a stir, and that is 1.5 kilos of Shepherd's Delight. This is another Gladfield specialty malt, and it's kind of unlike anything else I've really tried. I guess it's kind of like a crystal malt. It adds a sweetness to it, but it has a interesting, rich, deep, kind of dried stone fruit-like flavor. Kind of dates, plum, sultanery a little bit. It reminds me of Christmas cake. Good, proper New Zealand Christmas cake, not whatever that tripe is that they try to put on you in America. So that's all of the grist. Everything we're putting in there is in there now. All we need to do now is let this chill for a little bit over an hour. I think I'm going to let it go today. This has been mashing for an hour and 45 minutes now. I had a little trouble with the temperature being too low for the first half hour. That's why I ended up mashing so long. If you want more details on that, there is a video I put out last week talking about checking your tools. I highly recommend it. But it's not going to affect the mash at all. If anything, we're going to have slightly better conversion. Not a big deal. But now it's time to just open this valve out, dump all of the wort into the fermenter, and then we'll sparge a little in on top. And that smells absolutely heaven. After sparging, we have roughly, I'm going to say 45, 50 litres in the fermenter, and the refractometer is saying 1039. I want to top this up to around about 75, 80 litres in total volume, and I'd like to hit roughly between 9 to 10% ABV. So we're looking at somewhere around 1070, 1075 in terms of gravity that we want. When I top this up with water, it's going to dilute the gravity of this fermenter down to probably a little bit over 1020, or I should say 1.021, 1.022, somewhere around there, which means we're going to need a little bit over 1050 worth of gravity in terms of sugar in a total volume of around about 80 litres to get this up to where we want. And super freaking rough math. I'm not stressed about this being exact at all. That comes out to roughly 10 kilos of sugar. So let's get that in, shall we? And of course, a little quick to get that dissolved. The only things I have left to do now is top this up to around 75, 80 litres of water. I'm going to use cold water because that's still quite hot from the mash. It's been sitting for a little while, but I could bring the temperature down a bit. I also want to add in another ½ kilo of oats. This is purely a seat of the pants thing where I ponder if perhaps using oats that haven't been converted will make the spirit even more silky. I've had such great success getting mouthfeel out of oats, just throwing them into the fermenter. I would be loath to miss out on that because they've been mashed. So I'm going to put some of those in. And of course, I'm going to put 1 kilo of raisins in there as well. So I'm going to blitz those up in a bit of water, whack them into the fermenter, and then we can talk about yeast. Regular viewers of the channel are not going to be surprised at all to see Angel AM1 being used for the yeast in this specific project. Why am I using it? It's an M-style yeast, which means it's, I guess you could call it a Scotch-style whiskey yeast. And the reason I'm using it in this specific video is I want those whiskey-like flavors, the grain-like flavors to come through. This allows that to happen. More specifically, I want to kind of flirt with the fruity aspects of brandy coming from the raisins and the fruity aspects of a Scotch whiskey, mostly from the esters and the yeast. That's why I'm using this bad boy. The other reason that I like this yeast, honestly, is that it's relatively affordable compared to other M-style yeasts. I trust the flavor profile and the performance of this yeast, along with the value proposition of it so much that we have it in our store, chasercraft.com. We ship from New Zealand and America, if you're interested. So this wash fermented out in about 6 days, and it is down to 10.05, which isn't crazy low for a wash, especially a vodka wash. But we do have a bunch of oats in here and the all grain aspect, so I'm not that stressed about it. It may drop another point if I let it go another 3 or 4 days. It's been sitting pretty solid at right around 10.05 for the last 2, so I'm going to run it. Because we don't have a whole lot of chunky stuff in this wash, like the fruit brandy from last week, I'm not going to press it or squeeze it. I'm just sieving it through a sieve to get the chunky stuff out. I'll give the raisins that weren't puffed up or broken up in the food processor a little half-hearted squeeze just to get a little bit more liquid out of this, but I'm really not worried about it this time around. I managed to fit about 45 litres of the wash into the stills pot. We're up and running now for the stripping run. Same deal as every other stripping run. I'm just running hard and fast, and right now we're currently reading a little under 50% ABV, so probably not even halfway through this run. I've been slowly creeping the power up. Once again, just checking the sight glass in the column to make sure we're not pushing a puke. I'll run this down to probably about 5% ABV for this run. In fact, I am probably due to attempt bumping this up to 4 kilowatts and see if the puke will handle that. Right now, however, we have a solid but not overpowering amount of smoke, and definitely a little bit of that fruitiness as well. So, I have high hopes for this one, team. Hopefully it's going to work out as planned. So I distilled down to under 10%, emptied the still out, strained some more wash, filled the pot up, and ran another stripping run. 2 stripping runs, and I was through most of the wash. The low wines from the stripping runs are in the pot, along with around about 5-6 litres of leftover wash that didn't fit into the stripping runs. It's just coming up to temperature now, as you can see by the dancing going on the plates, and I happen to be using 3 plates today. The idea here is that I want to hit probably like 90-ish% ABV in average. I want to push this towards being a vodka, clean it right up, have a lot of distillation on it, but also retain a decent amount of flavor. I don't want this to be a great big, heavy, grungy, peaty style whiskey. That's not what we're going for. I want kind of halfway between a peated scotch and a vodka. While the still was heating up, I remembered that I had the leftover heads from last week's fruit brandy, and I decided to add that into the top of the column just so I didn't have to break the still down again. And I hope that that is going to kind of add some fruity flavors to the mix and lift the overall impression of the spirit a little bit away from the deep, dark, heavy feeling of peat. We'll see if that was a good idea or not at the end of the run. The plan now is to let this column balance out for about 5 minutes, and then we'll play the little dance of creeping up the power and creeping down the amount of cooling water going into the reflux condenser to get the offtake speed that we're wanting at the spout. I'll keep that low at the beginning and eke out heads first, and we'll see where we go from there. We've got an offtake speed that I'm more than happy with at the moment, and I'm currently collecting 4 shots. Honestly, I don't know if I'll reuse heads from this run for anything, but we may as well, do it in case I'm going to. So let's switch over from 4 shots to heads. I'll be keeping the speed nice and slow and low for the heads, and as I say that, it speeds up. I'm happy with that. If it gets any quicker, I'll knock it back down again. Anyway, I'll come back to you once we're ready to start looking at the cut from heads to hearts. I switched over to the Parrot for most of the heads collection just so I could keep an eye on the ABV, as that's kind of important for the process of the spirit I'm trying to make. It's been hovering right around 92% ABV, which is perfect. A little bit higher, a little bit lower every now and again. I've been having some trouble with water pressure and the amount of cooling going into the reflux condenser fluctuating a little bit, but I've been monitoring that. I'm happy with how the run's going, and we're starting to creep up onto the transition from heads to hearts. I'm just going to have another little taste now. Important to note too, if you are using a Parrot, when you're doing the assessments, do it at the still, not at the Parrot. Still a little bit headsy, but we're getting to the point where I'm going to want to switch soon. And for that reason, I'm going to ditch the Parrot for a little while, empty it out, make the cut, and then if I decide to use the Parrot again, I'll put it back in for the duration of hearts when I know I'm in hearts. The issue is with the Parrot is because we're dripping in this end and it's sort of being pushed out the other end, there's a chance for, let's say, older and newer distillate to mix and mingle in here and kind of smear our cut point. The larger the batches, the less likely this is to really be an issue. If this is a whiskey, honestly, I don't even know if I would care that much. I'd just kind of taste it coming off here and make sure that I was happy on this side. But because I want a really crisp cut and a really clean cut to hearts, because this is going to be drunk primarily white and not aged, we'll get the Parrot out of there just to make sure that it doesn't cause any issues. We're now well and truly into hearts. I'm collecting in the large pot over there at the still. But I have a few little jars here from the transition from heads on this end through to hearts on this end. Right after this jar is where I made the cut to the large vessel. So I just want to assess this to see if I'm missing out on anything, to see whether I cut at the right place, if I need to make any changes. So that one, no. We're not doing anything with that one. I can just tell by the smell that that's still heads. It smells a little bit too intense. It's prickly on the nose, and it has an ever so slightly kind of chemically borderline stainless aroma to it. This one smells delicious. This one smells like the fruit brandy. Man, I'm so tempted to take that, but that's not what I'm going for here. Like, that is kind of fun, but it's too headsy to be clean enough to drink as a white spirit for sure. This one's even closer. This one almost, this one's kind of silky, but it also still has that like aggressive heads feeling in the mouth. I don't taste anything wrong with it, but it doesn't feel right. The mouth feels wrong, the flavor's good. Which brings me to this one, which is the one I was really interested in. Wow, okay. Out of all of them, this one has the most apple flavor. I'm gonna ditch this 100%, this 100%. If I wasn't going for a spirit that was white, I'd keep this, but yeah, no good. No good. So really the only question is this one. And you know what? I think I'm gonna hang on to that for now and see how I feel about the rest of the spirit. So these are all heads. I can decide whether or not I want to keep those, whether they just go into the faints jar and get used as cleaner. Let's go back to assessing the hearts run, shall we? I decided to switch back to the Parrot for a little while just to double check our ABV. Still running strong at about 90–91%. The power of plates, isn't that awesome? We've been running for hours now and we've only dropped like 1%. And honestly, that probably has more to do with the way the still is running than how far through the run we are. Anyway, I'm gonna kick back, relax. As soon as I even think that perhaps we're getting near tails, I'll switch over to rolling through cuts jars again. And then once we are starting to detect maybe something creeping through, I'll start collecting a row of cuts jars like we did at the beginning, and then I can select which of those make the cut and which don't. The run is done. We have the hearts here going all the way down into, let me double check, but yeah, definitely tails. Interestingly enough, even though we have grain in here, it's gone towards the kind of vodka-y reflux tail. So to me, they always smell kind of like cement rather than wet dog, wet cardboard. That is definitely out. This one, yeah, no, I'm getting that cementy thing. I have to keep reminding myself that even though this is smoky and kind of reminds me of a scotch, I'm making something more like a vodka. So, like I said, when I was talking about cuts earlier on, maybe I would consider keeping this if we were going to barrel age this, but we're not, so out. This is where the decision making starts to come in, I think. I don't smell or taste that cementy flavor, but I get the mouthfeel of it, so that one's out. This is the interesting one. It smells super freaking clean with a touch of smoke. I love the flavor of this. It gives more smoke, definitely more smoke than this has. But the mouthfeel is just a little bit jaggy. Do I want to go that jaggy? Man, I should have split this in half, I think. You know what? I think I'm going to play it safe. Am I? You know what? Let's split the difference and put like a third of this in. Cool. Yep. I made the decision. I'm not going to second guess myself. We're going to roll with it. The bugs are gathering. They smell tails. All right, let's taste this. So I'm going to proof it down to, let's aim for right around 40–45%, which is going to be 10 mils of that. 12 mils of this. That should be right around 40% ABV. All right, let's give it a go, shall we? All right, on the nose, wow. That's super freaking clean. A little bit of the fruit, a little bit of the kind of brandy-like notes, but no smoke, funnily enough. I mean, I've been sitting here tasting smoky stuff all day coming off the still, so maybe I'm a little desensitized to it, but not getting any smoke on the nose. Nose is great. Mouth presence is awesome. It drinks like a vodka. Very, very smooth, for want of a better word. No alcohol, like really, really low alcohol presence in the mouth, alcohol burn. I have to imagine the oats are helping out with that and kind of silkying it up a little bit. But I am getting an interesting brandy-like flavor, like I've come to expect by throwing raisins into a wash like this. Thanks to Alan Bishop for that, for hooking me up with that knowledge. And a very nice, firm but subtle, smoky characteristic that kind of lingers in the mouth afterwards. It kind of hums away after you swallow. It kind of sneaks up on you a little bit. It feels like it's going to get really smoky, but then it doesn't. It pulls way back, and you're left with the fruity kind of sweetness in your mouth. This is exactly what I was hoping for, to be honest. So, if you've been wondering why I've made this and what I have in my mind to turn this into, drum roll please, absinthe. I want to make a slightly smoky absinthe. And this has potential, but here's the slight issue. It's perfect now. Right now, it has the perfect amount of smoke. When I make the absinthe, I'm going to have to distill this again with the botanicals. And when I make the cuts for the botanicals, maybe we're going to cut too much smoke out of this. I guess you're just going to have to wait, and I'm going to have to wait till the next video to see how that plays out. So, thank you for hanging out with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm really happy with the end result. If you have any other ideas on how I could use this vodka, what we could make with it, I would love to hear your thoughts in the description down below. Or if you have specific ideas on what I should do for a different, like new age absinthe with this, other ingredients I could add, once again, let me know down there. I'll catch you next time, team. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.